This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damien, David, and Matt.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another season preview here on the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Matt, and I'm here to talk to David about the Philadelphia Phillies, my favorite team. Not really. Go Braves. But we're going to be unbiased here on the Bat Flip Podcast, unless you're Damien and you just gloat about the Dodgers for an hour. But yeah, the Philadelphia Phillies have been one of the better teams in the National League the last few years. They went to the World Series in 2023, had an excellent season. Last year, they won the National League East. It was the first time in 7 years that a team not named the Braves won the East. And then the Phillies lost in the division series to a division rival in the Mets, who were a wild card team that took care of the Brewers and then beat the Phillies. So, the Phillies have had this core that they brought in. A lot of them were free agents or trades, which is kind of interesting. A lot of teams these days, you think about like the Braves, the Dodgers, you go out the Astros. These franchises that have been really successful over the last 10 years. They've built their team primarily through drafting international free agents, bringing up prospects, going through a rebuild, and then supplementing it with high quality free agents and a couple trades. But the Phillies kind of did the opposite. They kind of went out and they brought in guys like Zack through free agency, and they brought in guys like Bryce Harper through free agency, Trea through free agency, Kyle Schwarber through free agency. So they've really built their team a different way, but it's been very successful for them. So they are starting to get a little bit older. They're kind of coming toward the end of their competitive window, but that's something that's really it's hard to tell when that's going to happen with teams. You might have teams that end up a lot of guys in their mid 30s that perform well, and you might have teams that don't do that. So, David, what are your overall thoughts on this Phillies organization?
I mean, I love the way this group has been run the last several years, right? I think building through free agency needs to be a viable path in to modern baseball, and the Phillies have proven that you can do this. They've also made good trades, right? I mean, one of their starting pitchers this year is going to be via a trade they made this offseason. They've also had some internal development go really well. We'll talk about a bunch of these guys. I think they've been a kind of a amalgamation of everything that you need to do to be a successful baseball organization. They've been able to do that since Dave Dombrowski took over. Dombrowski's kind of famous for pumping up the team salary, the team revenue, and then dumping, and he bails and leaves the next guy with a bunch of bloated contracts. But I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen here. A lot of the contracts are pretty short term, except for the Trea and Bryce Harper ones. Those are the ones that are kind of the long standing contracts. But even the Bryce Harper deal looks fantastic. It's $25 million a year. I mean, Bryce Harper's paid less than some guys who are getting some guys who are much, much worse baseball players. And Bryce has had to move out of the outfield, but he's been excellent over the last couple of seasons. So I'm excited to talk about this team. This was, if you follow our podcast at all, this was my prediction for the World Series winners. So I'm thinking this team's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can move on and talk about some of those Dave Dombrowski moves. There weren't that many of them this year, but we can hop over to this add and subtract page. And, they made some free agent additions, as the Phillies have typically done under Dave Dombrowski. They brought in Max Kepler through free agency. They brought in Jesus Luzardo through a pretty big trade with the Marlins. That's a very interesting one. We'll see how that ends up going. Very polarizing pitcher, I would say. Jordan Romano, they brought him in. He was, I think, DF. He went DFA. Was he non-tendered by the Blue Jays?
Non-tendered by the Blue Jays.
Yeah, but he's been a real successful reliever throughout his career. So that's a pretty good add for me for the Phillies. At least it's a low risk, high upside add. They brought in Joe Ross through free agency. Just why not, I guess. Carlos Hernandez, they got him off of waivers. He should play a part of this bullpen. And Nabil Crismat, they brought him in through free agency. I mean, I don't think he'll be on the big league roster at the beginning of the season. Maybe with a injury to Suarez, they might put him on there. I don't know. But David, you got any thoughts on these ads?
Yeah, I think this is a quiet offseason for the Phillies. Luzardo obviously being the big piece here, but you look at the subtractions, right? I mean, Romano is taking the place of Jeff Hoffman and Carlos Estevez. Estevez came over in the trade deadline last year. I think bringing in Romano fits that, fills that hole very nicely. Romano's one of those kind of dog closers that's going to go out there and pump big fastballs at high velocity. And the Blue Jays are kind of famous for being really bad about reliever development. So we've seen guys leave the Blue Jays and have success out of the bullpen elsewhere. So I feel like Romano is probably going to jump into the pitch lab with the Phillies and find some success. He's still got a lot of really good stuff. Luzardo, obviously, he's more of an injury risk type guy. And, the polarizing nature is that he's not always healthy, despite nasty stuff and good results when he is healthy. So the question for him, obviously, and with Suarez down, can he, pitch enough to make that addition worth it? I think it will be. I think Luzardo will be fine. He fits really nicely into this rotation at 5. I think he's starting the second game, according to how the Phillies have this lined up, but I think he'll be like the third or fourth best pitcher in this rotation, which is a great spot for him to land. Kepler's good. I think he'll be fine in left field. Not the worst of the free agent left fielders that we've seen, but he's been a lifelong Twin. I'm interested to see how he performs in a much more different environment over in Philadelphia. But yeah, the big add is Luzardo, and I think the best fit is Romano. I think Romano is going to have the most success of this group.
Yeah, I'm with you. Luzardo is interesting. I'm not a huge Luzardo person. I was, and then I don't know. I just kind of lost faith in him a little bit last year. He dealt with some injuries, and that's a big problem for him. And they did give up a lot to in order to get him, which is interesting. I mean, uh, he was. I think they gave up a top 100 guy and a guy
Yeah.
that was just off the top 100. So they gave up a pretty good bit for him, and they're going to need him to stay healthy, especially since, as I mentioned a minute ago, Ranger Suarez is already on the IL. So that's one thing that's been really a big deal for the Phillies in their run has been their pitchers have stayed healthy way more than any other team's pitchers, and that's something that already this year you're starting to feel a little bit worried about it. But yeah, not too much else there. Kepler, like you mentioned, he's fine. He's had some good years. Can be a perfectly fine platoon corner outfield bat for them. But looking at some of the subtractions here, not a whole lot of subtractions either. Jeff Hoffman's a kind of big one. He was somebody that the Phillies kind of remade into being a really good closer for them last year, and he was real successful as a he wasn't successful as a starter, and he'd never done anything anywhere else, and he comes over and has a couple great years. Spencer Turnbull, he's kind of one of those 5 starters, really a quad A guy. He did throw a no hitter one time, but
Turnbull's interesting because he had really, really good numbers last season. He is still a free agent. The injury bug for him is very significant to the point that teams have not signed him despite pitching injuries and such. I wouldn't be surprised to see him return to the Phillies, but it seems like that ship has sailed if he's still a free agent and they've had injuries in the rotation.
Yeah, he's been injured an awful lot too. As you mentioned, I know he had a Tommy John surgery a few years ago, and definitely one of those ground ball guys. So, but yeah, Carlos Estevez, I know you really like him, and I'm not a giant Carlos Estevez person, but I think he's pretty decent. He did not do great for the Phillies last year after the trade, so I don't think I count on that as a huge loss, although the talent of him might be a loss. I don't know that the production that you're losing with him is not that big of a deal. Austin Hayes didn't do too much for the Phillies. He came over at the deadline. And then Dylan Covey, not too much loss there. So definitely definitely not a huge offseason on either side here for this team. I mean, you lose Jeff Hoffman, you kind of replace his production with Romano, maybe. You bring in Luzardo. That's a nice ad. Not a whole lot else going on here in the ad sub.
Yeah.
Guess we can move on and talk about the bats real quick. We've got Max Kepler, as we mentioned. He's in left field. Brandon Marsh is going to play center field for them. He has been pretty good for them since coming over from the Angels a couple years ago. That's been a pretty good win-win trade with him and Logan O'Hoppe. We've got Nick Castellanos still wandering the landscape in right field. Not sure where the ball is going to come down, and not catching it very well, but hitting home runs at weird times. Definitely still going on. So he's going to be out there in right field. Alec Boehm at third. He's a pretty polarizing player as well. We'll see how he does this year. He's been a little bit of an up and down guy. Trey Turner at short, he's one of their stars. Brought him in a couple years ago on that huge contract. Still a very good player. Bryson Stott at second base. He's developed into a pretty solid second baseman. Can hit a little bit. Definitely gets on base pretty well. Not a lot of power, but he plays good defense. Steals some bases. Pretty good player there. Bryce Harper, of course, is the heart and soul of this team. He's their star. He's at first base. Really transitioned well to first base last year. Um, Kyle Schwarber is at DH here, which is definitely where he needs to be and not in the outfield. JT Realmuto still there behind the plate. So definitely a nice lineup here. There's a lot of name value here. The one question I'll have for you, David, is this lineup has a player that's 32, 32, 32, 32, 34, and 33 in there. That's star players. Alec Boehm is 29, so he's almost 30. And then Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh are 27. So the age of this team, is that going to be a factor this year, or is that something where we still are going to be fine here?
Oh, we're still gonna be fine here. You didn't mention what one guy above 35. Like, I mean, older, yes, but I'm gonna call that experienced here. I think, as a 30 plus myself, I have to say it's not that old, right? 30's not that old. But these guys in particular, I think the leaders of the team, like you mentioned, like Bryce Harper, I actually think that projection war, it just, a lot of these guys don't even get the value that they bring to a team through war, right? A guy in your clubhouse like Nick Castellanos is very valuable. He's a baseball rat. He's always out there, regardless of whether or not he's fielding the fly ball, which it stinks for Castellanos because the war number in particular is very heavily impacted and influenced by defense. And if he was just playing DH, the number wouldn't be so low. Like he's a little bit above league average as a hitter. He's a guy who's out there. You know what you're going to get every day from him, and that's a valuable thing. I like Nick Castellanos still. I love a lot of these guys, right? I mean, Kyle Schwarber is still a great power hitter. I think he's a guy that's going to go 30 to 40 home runs next year and provide that big thump from the left side. The young guys, I think, are where this team could make their money, though. I think those star players, while great, they have, what you're gonna get from those guys a lot of the time. If Alec Boehm, Bryson Stott, Brandon Marsh, one of those guys could break out, have a really big year, which Boehm kind of did last year, and it kind of led him to the NL East. And if you could get a Bryson Stott power surge where he hits 25 home runs, you might have something like really, really good going on here in Philadelphia. And that makes me feel a lot better than some of these other teams that we've been talking about in this prediction series, where a lot of those guys were, some teams have a ton of very young players, and it's, but I feel like young players are often pretty volatile. In the Phillies case, you can handle some volatile players because you have so many solid players in the lineup. So, I'm looking for a Bryson Stott. Bryson Stott's probably the guy I got my eye on. Is, can he get to a little more power? Can he get to be that guy who hit the home run in the playoffs a couple years ago, the grand slam to go ahead? I think it was against the Marlins. Like, he's got that pedigree. He can do it. I just want to see it for a full season because I think he can be better than that 3 WAR projection.
Yeah, he definitely can, especially with his defense. That gives him a 3-win floor, and his projection at the plate is the 99 WRC plus. So he's projected to be almost exactly league average at the plate. And if he does hit for a little bit more power, then he could be a 110, 115 guy, and that would really boost his numbers up on a seasonal value. But and you mentioned Alec Boehm. One thing that's a little bit concerning for him is batted ball luck last year was really good in the first half, and he really fell off in the second half. He also doesn't give much value defensively, so it's one of those things where he's got to hit. And if he's hitting at the 90 WRC plus level he was in the second half last year, that's not going to cut it for him at third base. So definitely interesting. The stars are going to be the stars. I think this team's still really good. Kyle Schwarber also had a career year last year. It was a 135 WRC plus. He did have a year that had a little bit more than that, but it had some injuries involved that season where he didn't play as many games. So last year he put up his best WAR season of his career. So that was pretty interesting, and I would assume he continues to do about that 2 to 3 WAR DH. He's a really good DH. So definitely a lot to like there. The bench pretty good. Johan Rojas is a really good defensive player. He can pinch run, good fielder. Edmundo Sosa has given them some valuable at bats at times. Marshawn and Clemens are fine bench players to have here. The prospects to know: this farm system is not very good. But the Aiden Miller is a pretty good prospect. He's pretty well thought of in a lot of baseball circles. He's a top 15 guy on Fangraphs overall. So he's interesting. He's not. He's not. He's probably not going to play a role at the big league level this year. He just barely got to Double A last year. He was only 20 last year. He's going to be 21 this year. So definitely somebody to look out for in the future, though. And then Justin Crawford, the son of Carl Crawford, was a former first round pick for them. That he's kind of interesting. He's kind of like his dad. He's got speed. He's a speedy guy, but he doesn't hit for a whole lot of power. Did have a really good season in the minors last year. Put up a 130 WRC plus and 42 stolen bases. So kind of interesting prospect to know there. But I guess we can move on and talk here about the pitchers. And this is where the Phillies have kind of been. Their offense has gotten a lot of credit over the last few years, but I think their starting rotation has kind of been the reason that this team has been successful. And it really all starts with Zack Wheeler. Zack Wheeler he wasn't cast away by the Mets, but he was kind of cast away by the Mets. And the Phillies in the division, they signed him, and Zack Wheeler has done nothing but been like a Cy Young contender every year that he's been with the Phillies. And it's been incredible. The best thing about Zack Wheeler in his time at the Phillies has been the ability to stay pitching. He's only missed like 6 starts his entire time he's been with the Phillies, and that runs back to 2020. He's pitched 200 innings twice, including in 2024. And in 2023, he pitched 192 innings. And all of them have been very good innings. His highest ERA he's had in that time span was in 2023 when he had a 3.15 FIP to go along with his 3.61 ERA, which is still excellent. So Zack Wheeler has developed into an elite pitcher. He's a really good ace for this team. He's awesome. Aaron Nola, they brought him back last year after he became a free agent briefly, and then they signed him to a new contract. And he's been excellent for them as well for a long time. Now, he's not quite as dominant as Zack Wheeler, but he's also durable. He's been incredibly durable. He's been in his he's made at least 32 starts every year since 2021. Obviously 2020 he wasn't going to make 32 starts because it was a shortened season. Before that, his 2 seasons before that, he made 33 or 34 starts. This guy makes all his starts, and he pitches at a pretty good rate too. I mean, he's got a 3.70 career ERA. Last year at a 3.57 ERA. Very good pitcher there. And then you get to some interesting guys. Luzardo, we talked about him a little bit already. He's one of those. He's a little inconsistent, and the injuries, man, it's a problem for him right now. And we'll see if he stays healthy. The Phillies obviously have done some things right, keeping guys healthy. But Jesus Luzardo, they really need to find a way to keep him healthy this year. Be that number 3 in the rotation. Christopher Sanchez has been good for them. He was great last year. I don't know that he's quite as good as he pitched last year, but I think he's going to be really solid. If he's in there as your number 4, then like you're sitting pretty. If he's there as your number 4, Taijuan Walker, that was not a good signing at all. They've hit in free agency a lot. Taijuan Walker's not very good. I'm honestly kind of surprised he's still with this roster and hadn't been released already. But we'll see. They need him to start the season because of the injury down there. He mentioned to Ranger Suarez, we got listed there. I know Ranger Suarez is probably not going to miss a super huge amount of time, but it's a back problem, so those can be kind of weird. But this rotation, I think it's probably the best one we've talked about so far. If you can, if you plug in Suarez there, your worst pitcher in this rotation by projection is Jesus Luzardo, and if he's your worst pitcher in your rotation, it's pretty good.
Yeah, this is right up there with the Mariners for best rotation in baseball. It's one of those two, I think. Presuming the Dodgers, it's them two and the Dodgers really is what it feels like. And I think we don't celebrate durability enough. I also don't think the projections celebrate durability enough. Zack Wheeler was over 5 WAR each the last 2 seasons, nearing 6 WAR. And you bake in a little bit of I don't know that I would even bake in a little age regression at this point. Like guys are
35.
guys at guys are pitching into their 40s now, you know, with health. And it wasn't until Scherzer didn't start breaking down until he was like 39 or 40. Like it feels like until Zach Wheeler shows me that he can't go for 200 innings, I'm going to pencil him in for 200 innings. Aaron Nola, I'm pencil him in for 180 innings. Like being able to do that is so valuable for these pitchers and for this Phillies team. They just, you mentioned, oh, well, I'm not sure why Taijuan Walker's there. Well, Taijuan Walker might be needed it as that six-man swing guy, but they don't need anybody else. Like we have the prospects down there, like Andrew Painter might finally get to major leagues this year. It's been a couple years for him. He's had some elbow injuries and stuff, but like you have this team has just not needed any help in the rotation. They don't need those swing guys. Like I think Taijuan Walker being able to step into the bullpen, be that sixth man swing guy. You'll probably see Joe Ross get DFA'd once Suarez comes back. I think that's kind of the natural progression. And yes, Walker's kind of a failure in terms of a signing, but I feel like he provided good value a couple of years ago, and then he's obviously struggled since. But he'll be fine in that sixth role. That's the kind of role that a player like this can actually take on and thrive in a little bit. So I feel okay about that, but I mean, good grief, dude. The top two of this is so Zach Wheeler's been kind of snubbed out of a Cy Young vote. Like Chris Sale had to win the Triple Crown in order to take it from him this year, and then you had to point at the ERA thing to lose it to Blake Snell the year before. Like there's just been some fluky things. He deserves a Cy Young. He needs to get one. I'm hoping this is the year.
Yeah.
Like he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball for 4 or 5 years running now.
It feels a little bit like Chris Sale before last year, where it's like he could have won it like 6 different times, but it's just for whatever reason, someone either had an insane year that was slightly better, or somebody had some more had a little bit better luck or whatever. But he was probably the best pitcher in the league like 6 different times, and that's kind of how Zach Wheeler's been here with the Phillies. And and you mentioned that there is a lack of depth here. The prospects down there, Andrew Painter, we don't know. He's a really, really talented guy, but he's been injured a lot. He's coming off of Tommy John surgery. He's young, and young guys that come off of Tommy John surgery, sometimes it takes them a little bit of time to get their stuff back, get their command back, especially. Moises, I'm not sure.
Moise Chase.
Yeah, he's still really young. I doubt he plays a role in the big leagues this year. He's only in Double-A. And then Mick Abel has just never been able to figure out how to throw strikes. He's really, really, really struggled at the Triple-A level, and he's repeated that level. In 2024, he had a 6.5 walks per 9 right there. And the one thing that you can say negatively about the Phillies pitching here is that if they do have a couple of injuries this year, which they haven't had to deal with that. That's we don't know. Obviously, the Phillies are doing something right to not have to deal with it, but there's a little bit of luck involved in that too. If they have a year where they have a couple of injuries, they really have no depth in pitching in starting pitching. They really, I mean, there's just not, unless Painter is fully healthy midseason, then he could come up. But there's just not a lot there. So
sure, but I guess my pushback on that would be, we've seen teams that are hoping to contend throwing out much worse options. Like
no doubt.
We just saw the Orioles. Like their rotation is patchwork and duct tape. Like this rotation is built very firmly. Great foundation. It's built like a big tall building. Even if we start knocking out some bricks, there's still going to be a whole lot of building there to take the brunt of this. So
and when I say that, I think I mean that's the only thing that's wrong about this rotation is that if somebody gets hurt, there's just not a lot of depth. Like when we talk about the Orioles, everything's wrong with their rotation. They don't have a good current rotation or have depth. The Phillies have a great current rotation, but there's a huge fall off if they lose any of these guys. I mean, as you can see, when they lose Ranger Suarez, Taijuan Walker's their option. I mean, that's a really big drop off.
He's at least a major league caliber pitcher. You're not picking up guys off the street. But
either way, the starting rotation here, the 5 guys that are projected to be in this rotation for the full season are really good. The bullpen, we mentioned Romano. Kirkering's really good. He's young guy. He came up a couple years ago. He's really entertaining. Got a great breaking ball. Orion Jose Alvarado's been here a while now. His command's a little bit spotty, but he's got nasty stuff. He throws really hard from the left side. He's solid. So you really should have 3 or 4. Matt Strom's had a couple really good years here. You really should have 3 or 4 good options here. Um, and then once you get beyond that, it's not great. Tanner Banks is kind of okay, but
I like
you
that
know,
Carlos Hernandez pickup
Carlos
there.
Hernandez pickup was definitely an interesting one. I'd like him. He's been one of those World Baseball Classic guys that's really looked good there. Um, and of course, you have Joe Ross, Tanner Banks, Jose Ruiz. They're middle relievers at this
Yeah,
point, and having those guys in there as middle relievers is fine. So
it's fine.
definitely a pretty good pitching staff here. Obviously, I'd say they're probably in the top 5 in baseball here in the pitching staff. So
Yep.
really good there. And I guess we can go from there and talk about the outlook for this team. So the Phillies in 2025, their over/under win total projection is for 91.5. So David, you going over or under that?
Oh yeah, I'll go over. I think this is a 95 plus win team across the board, right? I mean, it starts with the pitching, and I've been going over on every pitching staff that I really like. And this is a pitching staff that I really like. I mean, it's right there with the best in the baseball. Um, you know, I don't really, I like the offense. I know you don't as much, but when it comes to how to fight for this NL East, those teams are going to get to beat up on the Marlins. And then there's not as many games as they used to be against each other. So the Mets, Braves, and Phillies will not necessarily beat up on each other as much. I think we could very easily have 390 win teams. I believe you might have to correct me for the second year in a row. I think all 3 teams went over 90 last year.
The Braves might have won 89.
Right. Okay. Well, we're going to have at least 3 teams at that level again, very, very easily.
Yeah, I believe they won 89. I'll double check that real quick, but
They either won 89 or 90, but
they
the
89. Braves and Mets both tied at 89.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
but
think
it's close enough. Like they're
yeah.
91 caliber teams,
I
especially.
think we get 390
yeah,
win teams this year.
yeah.
That's
And of course, the Mets should be a little bit better this year, and the Braves aren't injured yet, mostly. So,
right.
but yeah, and I think I'm going to take the over on the Phillies here. I picked them in our season preview to win the division. I do not think they're the best talented team in this division. I think the Braves probably are, but the Braves already have, they're going to miss Acuna for a month. They're going to miss Strider for a few weeks. They're going to miss Murphy for a few weeks here at the beginning of the season. And I think that this division is going to be really close between the Braves and Phillies. So I think that could actually make a difference of like 2 games or something that decide this division. And the Braves losing those 2 games, that they might not have lost if they had Acuna and they had Strider and they had Murphy at the opening day, that might end up playing a factor here in the divisional chase. But I think both teams win well over 91 games. I think the Phillies won 95 last year. I don't see any way they could have fallen off from that unless the age regression really does hit. But I mean, I could see them winning 94, 95 again this year. I think they're a really solid team, really well built team. There is some risk to this team because of the age, and we talked about the pitching depth, but this team right now, they should be very similar to what they were last year. So odds to make the playoffs -265, huge favorite to make the playoffs. Odds to win the NL East +215. I think that's the second best odds behind the Braves, but it's really close. And then the odds to win the World Series +1200. That's really good odds. But David, you got any final thoughts on the Phillies?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it in my predictions episode, but it feels like this is the Phillies need to get one done. They need to go out there and win a World Series. This year feels like the best opportunity they've had, but it also feels like the best opportunity they may have in years forward. A couple of guys are free agents. Schwarber's a free agent next year, so this feels like the year. That World Series odds looks pretty good to me. I don't, we don't give gambling advice, but this is my pick. I think they're going to do it. So I'd say lay a bet down on them. I think that's pretty good odds for a team that's really solid, really well built, like you said. And I'm looking forward to watching them this year.
Yep, should be very fun to watch. So that'll do it for us here on this episode. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.